I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with the head. Intercepted. 30. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. We have got an absolutely stacked show for you tonight. I am your host, Rhett Matthew. Joined alongside me today, my good buddy, Mr. Bucs Nation, a.k.a. James Hill. Joining us as well from Buck What You Heard, Gene Thomas, and rounding it out, making his CFP debut, good friend of the show, Cody Haynes. Guys, we are gathered here today to break down the top players and stories from the second week of Tampa Bay Buccaneers preseason. Couple of joint practices with the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road this week, getting ready for the preseason matchup on Saturday night. It was an up and down week, but we are going to break it all down. We were talking a little bit before the show had started. Fellas, I'm excited to be here with you all. James, Gene, Cody, football's back. I know it's not back in an official capacity, but yeah, you got the right idea, Gene. Let's clap it up. Let's go ahead and get a round of applause. Look at that, sound effects and all. Football is back, ladies and gentlemen. Gene, how you doing today, my friend?
Man, I am glad to be here. Thank you for having me on. I'm blessed to be with you guys. I mean, you guys are amazing. I just love what you guys do. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, been a while since we've had this many people on the show. Excited to get some fresh insight and some different takes here on the show. So let's just dive right into it. Kind of alluded to it there at the beginning, but a tough week for the Buccaneers at joint practice. And a lot of time during training camp, the reports that you hear coming out are always how well these guys are playing. Like, you typically don't hear local beat reporters talking about how terrible a practice was. But it seems like Thursday and Friday, the Bucs just could not, Wednesday, Thursday, the Bucs could not get a break from Jacksonville. On both sides of the football, you had some mental mistakes. You had a lot of drops this week from Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan in particular, which is, again, something you're not used to hearing considering the hype around these guys. They're battling for that wide receiver 3 spot. On the other hand, with a lot of these drops from Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan, that Chris Godwin connection between Baker Mayfield and Chris Godwin has been heating up. Positive to hear some plays being made there in the absence of a guy like Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan. But James, wanted your thoughts overall on this Buccaneers offense, and I guess let's just start with the wide receiver room headed into this second preseason game against the Jags. Todd Bowles already said, don't expect the starters to play, so not expecting Mike Evans, not expecting Chris Godwin. So an even bigger spotlight now on Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan here in the early going of this game.
Yeah, I mean, and both those guys are still battling for a wide receiver 3 spot, right? We don't necessarily know how much those guys are going to play. They played a little bit there in preseason game number 1, but really you saw a lot of different guys out there like Ryan Miller, Tanner Canoe, and some of the other like backup wide receivers, so to speak. But it is going to still be interesting. I do wonder if since it is the second preseason game, we are going to see more opportunities for McMillan and Palmer going forward. Because both those guys have really been going toe-to-toe. I would probably give the edge to McMillan so far up to this point just because of how he's looked in practice and things along those lines. But I still think it is a bit of a competition there. I mean, and really, I think you guys would all agree, like, you can't go wrong with either guy. I think both have showcased a lot of good ability. Palmer last year and a little bit this year. McMillan, obviously, because the battle is still going on, and they're both good.
Yeah, a lot of talent in that wide receiver room. And guys, we look at the rest of the guys in this rotation. Raheem Jarrett's still very much in the conversation. Cody Thompson had a couple of really nice plays in the second half of last week's game against the Bengals. Cody, I want to toss this to you, and we'll open up this discussion here. Looking ahead to the 2024 season, when you look at these players, I know Chris Godwin seems like this group of wide receivers, and you look at the list that the guys that the Buccaneers have. What receiver do you think is most prone to a breakout season this year? Oh, we lost Cody. Well, that's the struggles of doing it live. So, Gene, I'm going to call it audible. I'll throw it to you. We're talking about which receiver on this Buccaneers roster has the best potential at a breakout season.
I'm going to say, and again, I think I've gotten more of a sample size from him, but Trey Palmer. And I think it's going to be reps. I think it comes down to reps. And ultimately, I will say this too. This is a long season. And eventually, somebody's going to have to step up at some point in the season. We can't. It would be a blessing to see no injuries, but one of the two is going to have to step up, or both. We're going to see them all out there on the field at some point. But for me, I think Trey Palmer. I think the game is slowed down for him, and I'm really thinking that he's going to be somebody that you're going to see a little bit more. I think his familiarity with Baker from last year is gonna bode well for him. But I think when we get to the season and the rubber hits the road, I think that's a guy that you're going to see a lot more of out of the two of them. Just to start the season, I'll say.
Yeah, consistency, the name of the game when it comes to Trey Palmer, at least. He's made plenty of plays in a Buccaneers uniform, but at least as far as training camp goes and towards the latter end of the season in 2023, just has to be consistent, has to make those catches at the end of the day. I know it's a lot more difficult than just making your catches, but consistency with a guy that we know can already make plays, I think is going to go a long way in his 2024 campaign. Cody, we're talking about which Bucs wide receiver could potentially be due for a breakout season. Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer have been talked about a lot. Gene just talked about Trey Palmer and his experience, his valuable experience as a veteran at this point. But your thoughts on the wide receiver room? Any surprises?
I don't think I want to say surprises, but I think that Jalen McMillan, I know that, a couple guys before practices even started, before training camp started, early in like rookie minicamp, everybody was talking about Jalen McMillan, and we're like, okay, maybe he's just, flashy right now starting off, but man, when training camp started, that guy is, he's kind of taken off. And I don't think that in the beginning, I thought that he would be this close to locking up that wide receiver 3 position at this point. But, he's been playing very well. But I want to give prop to, Trey Palmer. He's played very well last year, even when, there wasn't that many guys on the squad to take that wide receiver 3 spot. But he did very well last year. And I think that he's more of that, stretch the field type of player. I think that's really what they want to use him as. But he kind of got thrown into the fire last year as that wide receiver 3 spot. But yeah, Jalen McMillan, I think that ultimately he's going to be the one that takes it. But Chris Godwin, I think Chris Godwin's going to have a career year because like everybody talked about, he's getting moved back into the slot, where he's best, obviously. And, it's going to be a big year. I'd like to see McMillan and Trey kind of get a little bit more playing time in this preseason game, and I hope they really do. I want Jalen McMillan to, get the shot to actually take that spot. But yeah, I mean, both good players. I think they're both going to be great players for this team, but I have to give the edge to Jalen McMillan. I think he's going to be very good for this team.
Yeah, a guy that has been a contributor before who, quite frankly, I don't think is being talked about enough. Now, I know he hasn't wowed anybody at training camp practices or even in that first preseason game, but Raheem Jarrett's still very much on this roster, still in the wide receiver room. So I think he could eventually be another one of those wide receivers the Bucs carry into the regular season. But I'm going to be keeping a close eye on him in this game as it goes on, seeing how many reps he gets and just how useful he can be for either Kyle Trask or John Wolford as the game goes on. James, I wanted to get your thoughts before we move on as well. Chris Godwin moving back into the slot. It is a contract year for the Buccaneers wide receiver. Bucs potentially going to have some tough decisions to make at the end of the season. The development of Jalen McMillan going to have a lot to do with that as well. But your overall thoughts on Chris Godwin? A lot of people expecting some pretty high numbers from him moving back into the slot.
Yeah, I mean, he's had 4 1,000-yard seasons out of the last 5 years, 3 straight in the past 3 years. The touchdowns have been low, though. 2 last year, 3 the year before that, 5 in 2021, which isn't too bad. What's going to be so tough about this situation is the Bucs don't have a lot of cap space next offseason. I Bleav right now, per over the cap, they're projected to be like 5 million over. So not great. Now, obviously, you can move some money around, do some different types of things if you really want to bring Chris Godwin back, and they may do that. That's definitely going to be a possibility, especially with Mike Evans. How much time does he have left? He has kind of hinted or alluded to the fact he doesn't want to play much more. So you could kind of transition to Chris Godwin being your number one, and then Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan being there as a 2 and 3, maybe like 2-3 years from now. But there's a lot of ifs there. So, I mean, ultimately, we'll see. I don't think I have any doubts that Chris Godwin's going to go out there and have a good year, just based on how the recent track record has been and just how a lot of people have always known Chris Godwin to play. But there's going to be a little bit more incentive there for him with that year, with this year being a contract year for him. He's going to want to go out there and earn some more money for himself. So we will have to wait and see kind of how all that stuff kind of shakes out with the contract and whatnot. But I think it will give him a little bit more motivation to have a good year this year.
Yeah, a lot of people that we've talked to, at least plugged into this situation, have said that there's a higher chance than most people would think that the Bucs are going to make a strong effort to keep Chris Godwin on this roster beyond 2024. So expecting a big season from him. Would like to see him get in the end zone. This time a year ago, I kind of threw a take out there that he was going to be one of the more dependable targets for Baker Mayfield throughout the 2023 season. And while that was partially true, I just don't think he ended up in the end zone nearly as much as we would like, as much as we've known him to be able to do in the past as well. He's a big-time contributor on this Buccaneers offense. Gene, your thoughts on Chris Godwin? You're off. We can't hear you. We're doing it live.
Hey, that's how we do it. I was thinking the offensive coordinator is going to play a huge factor in how much Chris Godwin will how he'll flourish, whether or not he'll flourish in this offense. And to me, I think right now, looking at experience, I think we've upgraded at the offensive coordinator position. No offense to the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, but I think you have somebody with some real game time experience who will be able to utilize these players to their strengths. And I think we've seen that with Chris Godwin moving to the position he's at right now. Chris Godwin is a little bit, he's removed from the injury he had. I think the psychological effect and the physical effects of that injury are all cleared up. And this is going to be a big year for him. I think he's ready to go full tilt. We saw at the back end of the season, the Chris Godwin we were used to, whereas he was working towards that throughout the season. And I think he's in a really good position. And I'm with you guys. I Bleav that he's going to have a huge impact on this team. And, he's going to be somebody that's going to take him into the playoffs. And I Bleav the Bucs will go to the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I think he's got the most motivating factors around him in a very more than he's had in a long time is what I'm trying to say. Sorry,
Absolutely.
Words get hard sometimes. But I think a lot of things are pointing in the right direction for Chris Godwin. High production in the 24 season, a new offensive coordinator, moving back to his old role in the offense. And, you talked about getting over the mental hurdle of that injury, getting over the physical hurdle of that injury. He's feeling the best he has in years, and I think that's going to go a long way. But, Chris Godwin, I don't want to say becoming an underappreciated player in this Buccaneers offense because plenty of people love him. They know him well. But I'm excited to see him get back in the end zone a little bit more often. I'm excited to see more people around league circles talking about Chris Godwin because he's going to earn his money this year without a doubt. But, Gene, I'm glad that you brought up new offensive coordinator Liam Cohen because it is the perfect time to talk about what he has done with this Buccaneers run game. No starters against the Jags here for the second preseason game, but we can expect to see Bucky Irving, I assume. We can expect to see more of Sean Tucker, who had a really good day on the ground last week, and we can definitely expect to see more DJ Williams and Ramon Jefferson, who punched in the game-winning touchdown with under a minute to go against the Bengals last week. Cody, want to get your take on this. We talked about Liam Cohen. bringing some new ideas to this offense. For the most part, it's the same offense. Like, it's not like the Bucs are learning anything drastically different. It's not a major overhaul, but there's definitely some tweaks. And I got to say, a lot of fans, myself included, really, really like what we have seen from this run game. Just for example, last week, running out of tighter formations, making it easier for your offensive linemen and some of these dogs that you got up front, like a Graham Barton, Cody Malkman playing in this preseason. It's easier for these guys to open up run lanes. And then on top of that, you got Bucky Irving, who's hitting the hole at 100 miles an hour. I'm excited to see what this thing can develop into. But your thoughts on Liam Cohen and expectations for the run game this year?
Yeah, I want to go back to like earlier in the offseason when they were looking for an offensive coordinator. Everybody was freaking out. They're like, oh no, Dave Canales is gone. I understand that. Dave had a pretty good year. But if we remember, Dave couldn't run the ball just as much as anybody else, couldn't get this team to run the ball just as much as anybody else before. With Liam Cohen coming in, he's been there, done that, like you talked about. Rachaad White is a very good running back. Bucky Irvin, very good running back in college. I think with Liam Cohen coming in and then having, a center that's actually good at opening up space in the middle of the field, as we saw at this, this prior preseason game, I think that the sky's the limit for this offense rushing wise. And we're going to see a big year out of Rachaad White, even though now he's going to split the carries a little bit with Bucky Irving. But yeah, I'm very excited. I was very excited to see some lanes. I was very excited to see Sean Tucker actually get some lanes this year. Last year in the preseason, he didn't do much. Obviously, now we saw him break out what I don't remember how long the run was, but a pretty good run. It's very cool to see, and I think it's just going to be a lot better than it was last year. I think this is the year that we're finally like, okay, we can run the ball.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for it.
I think it was a 26-yard scamper for Sean Tucker against the Bengals. But Sean Tucker, I'm glad you brought him up as well, because he's a guy that a lot of Bucs fans were talking about early on in the 2023 season. And then I don't know if it was lingering issues or just something else entirely, but really didn't see him down the stretch. Not that the run game was going to have any luck with him out there, but did not get to see a lot of him. I think his presence in this preseason and the fact that, he's busting ass. There's no other way to put it. Now, it's an interesting situation that gets brought up, because if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago about what running backs the Bucs are going to carry, I would have kind of assumed at this point that Sean Tucker was going to be a practice squad guy, but Chase Edmonds has not been out there at all. I think he practiced a little bit the first week of camp and then literally sat out every day since then. A lot of people assume that he's kind of got the edge here because he is the veteran, but I really think if Sean Tucker has another good performance on Saturday night and then again next week, you could potentially talk about Sean Tucker being one of the running backs the Bucs carry into the regular season. Gene, talking a little bit more about the run game between Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, and now Sean Tucker over possibly Chase Edmonds. Your thoughts on where this run game is headed?
Man, the best ability is availability. And if you're on the sidelines, you're not helping your team do anything. I honestly believe if Sean Tucker has a game even closely resembling what he had last year, the coaches really have to, and I trust the coaches, but they have to really think about that. I would want because you're going to the playoffs, potentially the Super Bowl is every team's goal at the beginning of the season. So you want the best players available to get out there and do their thing. So you're looking at possibly Chase Edmonds being on the bubble, again, because he just hasn't been available since he's been here the majority of the time. So I definitely want to see the best running backs out there.
You can't talk about the run game without talking about the offensive line as we continue to transition here. James, wanted to get your thoughts on some of these younger guys that have really been showing us what's up here early in the preseason. Again, it's preseason, and I've said this before. I don't want to overreact because you're talking about a lot of these teams potentially not playing all of their starters. Not a lot of Jacksonville starters, if any, are expected to play on Saturday night. So when we evaluate guys like Graham Barton, Cody Malk, who has been playing with the first team, Elijah Klein later on in the game, when we evaluate this new and improved run game and this new and improved offensive line, this run blocking, some of these schemes that we've seen, even though we've seen maybe 5% of the new Liam Cohen playbook. I mean, we've seen all these things and we're trying our best to evaluate them. Don't want to overreact, but I'm going to be honest with you, James, it's hard to not like what we have seen regarding the physicality of this interior offensive line. Graham Barton, the first-round pick, really one of the guys leading the charge out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the most notable changes, right? Has been the change in the interior offensive line. Like Ben Bredesen has been out there. He looks to be a good addition, at least obviously in the very, very, very early returns. Cody Mock seems to be a little bit more comfortable out there. And like, again, like we talked about this, whenever Graham Barton was drafted, was he going to help out the run game? And so far it seems like he is, right? And that's huge. That's something the Bucs haven't had here for a couple seasons now since Ryan Jensen suffered his injury. Real quick, I just want to make a quick note to Cody's point from last year regarding Dave Canales' rushing attack. So in the 48 seasons that the Bucs have been around, last year's rushing attack was number 33 in franchise history in terms of total rushing yards in a season. 2020 had more. 2019 had a little bit more. You keep on going up, like, it's just it wasn't a great year overall for the Bucs rushing attack in 2023, just in terms of how they've been historically. 2021 had more. So they do have room to improve here a good bit. And I think a big reason for that is going to be their interior offensive line and getting more push and just getting better play overall. Having a guy who, has had experience starting a lot of games at left guard and Ben Bredesen, bringing in an upgrade at center and Graham Barton and Cody Mock getting a little bit more comfortable now in year number 2, that's going to be just as, if not more helpful than additions to the running back room.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Barton especially is one of those guys who brings a presence to that line that we haven't seen in a couple of years. I don't think we've seen a presence in that interior offensive line like Graham Barton since Ryan Jensen, like you said, point blank simple. He is a people mover. And that's what the Bucs have needed. You need a guy with the ferocity, the physicality, and just the physical strength to push these defensive linemen into the second level, into the third level. That we've been seeing this happen here early on in the preseason. I said last week one of my favorite plays was the Bucky Irving touchdown run because Graham Barton was in the end zone before Bucky Irving was. These guys are doing a good job at just opening things up and being physical at the point of attack, adapting to the point of attack. And one more thing that I will say before we wrap up the offense here, with this new Liam Cohen offense, I'm excited to see creativity with the offensive line. Now, I know you can only get so creative, but during training camp, we're seeing stuff like guards being pulled. I think Todd Bowles has said in the past that Tristan Wirfs is a weapon. Use him like one. We see guys like Trent Williams getting a running start from the left tackle position. I think Liam Cohen has seen a thing or two, whether it's in college or over there on the West Coast of the NFL. I think we can expect that. I think embracing the physical side of these offensive linemen, getting them in motion, and ultimately opening up run lanes for this run game is going to be exciting to see this season. But I'm excited to see how these guys can be used. You got a lot of versatile playmakers on the offensive line. Gene, your thoughts?
I just want to give a shout out to Jason Light, who's done wonders with the offensive line. Historically, I mean, the Bucs did okay under Mark Dominic, but when Jason Light came in, the cupboard was bare. They pretty much had to start all over from scratch. And what they've built right now is a testament to a general manager and great talent evaluators coming together to work with the offense, with the head coach, I should say, to put together what we have right now. I mean, there was a drop in performance last year with the loss of Ryan Jensen, with the loss of Ali Marpet. This team was still able to go to the playoffs. They've reloaded and brought in a Graham Barton. They brought in some key pieces here, and I really believe that this is just an improved offensive line over last year, and I think we'll see that. Hopefully, I'm not putting the cart before the horse here, but in my opinion, just what they've brought in, the talent they've brought in now, and kind of what they've shown. And I do realize that it is preseason. I don't want to get too overzealous, like you mentioned, but potentially this could be a upgrade over last year.
Yeah, you're looking at a lot of guys in this draft class who can come in and be contributors week one. I know availability is the best ability, so Chris Braswell, we're going to have to wait and see. Jalen McMillan, we're going to have to wait and see. But Graham Barton, we'll start with him. He is your highlight pick. He is your first rounder. And I think a lot of fans, I don't want to say it was a divisive move to go center, just because I don't think picking in the trenches is ever a bad thing to do in the first round. But a lot of people felt like there was no need for center. We'll find out by week 10. We'll know. So as far as, this rookie class, there is still some things yet to be determined. But Graham Barton looking good. When you look at last year's draft class, Kalijah Cansey looking good. Yaya Diaby looking good. Servassier Dennis, we'll talk about him a little bit later and what his role is going to be in that Bucs-Jags preseason game Saturday night. But one more position group on the offensive side of the ball I wanted to talk about. And James, I wanted to get your thoughts first. We can talk about the quarterback position, but really I just want to talk about Kyle Trask, because it seems like John Wolford, his role is what it is, right? I don't think anyone has any high expectations for John Wolford to have to go out there and make a name for himself. This may be Kyle Trask's last preseason as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. This also may be the most reps he gets before that third preseason game. I don't know if we're going to see a quarter of the starters. I don't know if we get crazy and we see a whole half of the starters in that third preseason game. But I want to assume that Kyle Trask, also assuming here that Kyle Trask getting the start in this game means that he's going to be playing with, some players that are higher up on the depth chart, some higher quality talent, which is an excuse that a lot of people have said in the past. But basically what I'm trying to get at here is that Kyle Trask needs a strong performance against the Jaguars. I think he needs a strong performance to close out the preseason, because as of right now, you ask a lot of people around Buccaneer circles, he's barely hanging on to that QB2 job. I don't think either John Wolford or him looked fantastic last week against the Bengals. They were both certainly able to move the football. Kyle Trask did have the interception, which a lot of people are going to hold against him. But, I mean, this is a guy who, in a contract year, has to determine, does he want to be a higher profile backup quarterback? Does he want to solidify his future in Tampa? I think he's going to have to play well to do either of those things at this point. James, what do you think of the situation that Kyle Trask now finds himself in?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, for preseason week one, I thought Trask looked okay. I thought he looked fine.
I thought it was a prototypical Kyle Trask performance. I don't mean to stomp on you, but it's one of those things where after every single Kyle Trask game, you can ask someone, how did he look? And it literally just depends on who you ask.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue he looked better than how he typically looks in the preseason, in my opinion. But Wolford, I thought, looked a little bit better. One thing that was so weird that I saw Todd Bowles say was like, it's still a competition for quarterback too. And I was like, this is a competition? I just kind of look, and maybe it's because I haven't been paying attention, but I kind of just assumed that Trask was going to be the quarterback too. So, I mean, to hear your head coach say that there's a competition there was surprising to me. It is interesting, right? And I do agree that this is going to be a big preseason game here for Kyle Trask. I don't know how many of the starters are going to be playing. From what I've seen, it sounds like it's going to be very similar to how it was just in preseason week one against Cincinnati. But we'll see, man. Like, I think if Trask continues on the path that he is, he will be the quarterback too going forward, just kind of by default, if anything. But you never know. I mean, I could be completely wrong on that. But yes, I agree 100%. I do think it is going to be a big preseason game there for Trask, and apparently that is a competition there, which I was surprised to see.
Don't everybody go at once. Gene or Cody, your thoughts on Kyle Trask?
I've said my piece. Do you want me to keep talking? I don't know,
I'll hop in here.
Normally I chime in, but it's not my show, so I'm trying to behave myself here. So,
yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with does this team want to carry 3 quarterbacks this year with all the competition that's around, on the defense, especially? Like, is it one of those situations where they're like, okay, Kyle Trask and John Wolford, they're in a competition, but they know that John Wolford's doing pretty good, and maybe they want to only carry 2 quarterbacks, and John Wolford's the one with the mind in this offense, just like what Blaine Gabbert was for Tom Brady. He was the mind of the offense. He helped him get where he needed to go. Is that kind of why there's a competition? Because they know that John Wolford will definitely sign somewhere else if he's on the practice squad, even though he didn't do it last year. I mean, I think there's going to be opportunities for him, but I don't know as much that it's as much as a competition as it is they know they want to keep the right guy and they don't want to let John Wolford in his mind leave this building.
Right. Yeah, I think I think the Bucs find themselves in a situation where they're just deciding who to saddle their horse up to. They're trying to decide who their next, I don't want to say Blaine Gabbert, but who their next Ryan Griffin is going to be. Is Kyle Trask a backup quarterback that's destined to be on this roster for 5 more years? Is John Wolford the guy who's going to be in Tampa for 2-3 more years, and they maybe draft another quarterback in the 5th or 6th round in 2025? I think that's the situation they find themselves in. And, you talked about the potential both of them bring to the team. I mean, let's face it. If Baker Mayfield goes down, the season is over, right? I think from what we've seen, we don't have to see too much more of either Kyle Trask or John Wolford to think that these guys are going to carry the Bucs to the postseason. I don't think it happens that way. I'm a Gators fan. I'm a Kyle Trask fan, but I just don't think he's that guy. I know he hasn't gotten a proper chance, but I think he finds himself in an uphill battle yet again. And, his performance is going to determine, I think, whether or not the Bucs are going to want to make that investment. You're good, Gene. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm torn. I think Wolford I think he won a playoff game with the Rams, I believe. And I look at the experience that he has. You kind of know what you have with Trask. Between the two of them, there hasn't been any separation. And that to me is kind of concerning. So I think the next thing I look at is consistency. On how's it going to look bringing Trask in when you have a quarterback who didn't lose the game, lose a play when he was in, and he made the most of his opportunities. I hope I make sense. I'm kind of rambling here, but I guess those are the things that you kind of have to look at, because between the two of them, I haven't really seen a lot of separation. So there are other things that you really kind of have to look at in order to make that final decision. And again, playoff experience has to factor in there at some point.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, just look at the resume, look at the real-time regular season experience in the NFL. It doesn't get much better than a playoff win. I mean, you can get an NFC championship or a Super Bowl win on your resume, but there's not much you can do to compete with a playoff win if you're a guy that just doesn't have that regular season experience. But we've talked a lot about the offense. Let's take a quick look at the defensive side of the ball and what the Bucs are going to need to do well if they want to have a strong outing against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was a quiet week for both sides of the football. Chris Godwin, Chris Braswell out of the pass rush position made a couple of plays for the Buccaneers on defense. And that, there wasn't a lot. So I think what I'm trying to say is that on both sides of the football here, the Bucs group that needs to do just that. We'll start with the pass rush. We'll start with some of these outside linebackers. Jose Ramirez, seemingly the only outside linebacker who showed up to play last week, had a couple of good plays he put on tape, but there wasn't much pressure. There weren't really any quarterback hurries. There wasn't much contact aside from, again, Ramirez, putting a couple of good reps on tape. There wasn't a lot going on last week, and there weren't any Bengal quarterbacks in duress. So looking at Marquise Watts, looking at Anthony Nelson, depending on how long he's out on the field, he did get some playing time last week. But looking at Chris Braswell, who has kind of been one of the lone bright spots this week on that defensive line, Vita Vea also had a chance to go out there and do some damage. We'll talk about the interior shortly. But Gene, wanted to get your thoughts first, just looking at this Buccaneers pass rush. We talked with J.C. Allen earlier this week. He does not seem too concerned about the pass rush, and I will say that he's one of the few people I've heard say that. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on their lack of production so far and ultimately where they stand headed into this season.
For me, the playoffs, players, I got playoffs on the brain here. Preseason is a time where you're working on your reps. If there's a slowdown or there is a disruption or anything like that, I'd rather it be now in the preseason rather than when you get to the regular season. We've got players like JTS, who's in a contract year. It's time to, put up or shut up. And so it's players like that you're going to be looking at, when the season starts. I'm kind of along the lines with J.C. Allen. I think we had a great pass rush last year, and good enough to get us into the playoffs. And, I think that they've improved with some of the players. Kalijah Cansey's is 100% healthy, knock on wood, that, going into this season, whereas we didn't have in the beginning of last season. So I think there are some things that are a little bit different. Vita Vea, who's slimmed down and trying to put himself in a position where, he can get in there and do some damage as well. Yaya Diaby has a year under his belt and he's coming in. So a lot of things that we really haven't kind of talked about, but personally, as long as you have those guys out there, I'm pretty comfortable with it. It's the backups. You want to make sure that you've got the best backups out there, because if somebody goes down, you want to be able to next man up, have them come in and continue that production.
Yeah, the best ability is availability. James, I know you got to take off here in a minute. Just wanted to get your last minute thoughts on the Buccaneers pass rush and what you're looking for here headed into game 2.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love JC. I think he does great work over there at the
Bucs
website that he writes for. Yeah, Bucs Game Day. I disagree. I am worried about this pass rush, man. I mean, look, you have a lot of guys with potential, right? JTS. Could he break out? Maybe, but we don't have any proof that he has done that in the past. Yaya, look, he had a great year last year, but can you really expect a third-round guy to kind of keep that momentum going for himself now that he is really by default the top guy in the outside edge rushing linebacker room? I don't know. Can you rely on another rookie and Chris Braswell to handle another heavy workload and have it be successful like it was with Yaya and Kalijah Cansey last year? It's another risk. And then you have Anthony Nelson, who's a bit of a more of a rotational guy. I had a video come out today that was talking about like the Bucs should sign like Yannick Ngakoue. I mean, also Randy Gregory apparently just hates us. But like, I do believe that, because I am worried about this pass rush, because they don't, in my mind right now, they have so much to prove in a year where you need a little bit more security, especially at pass rusher, right? It's why I do think they should go out and sign a guy like a Yannick Ngakoue. Because I just feel like I would feel better if they had a little bit more security and just a solidified guy is like, okay, this is our top pass rusher. You had it for a few years with Shaq Barrett, and now you hope it's Yaya Diaby.
Right.
But it is just more of, there's more questions than answers at that group right now.
Right, and I agree 100% in the fact that it feels like you're banking on Yaya Diaby having a follow-up to a stellar rookie season, and it doesn't always happen that way, especially for pass rush guys. Kathy Gillespie brings up a great point here in the chat. She says, I think that Todd Bowles wants to have a pass rush with the front defensive line rather than having to manufacture pressure so that we don't get burned deep as much as last year. Now, manufacturing pressure, talking about bringing up corners, bringing up linebackers, sending the house. Let's not forget Devin White played injured, and I know ultimately got benched later in the year, but he wasn't the same pass rusher that he had been in previous seasons. Levante David always going to be right as rain, but he needs some help, right? So there were some definite concerns and some holes on that Buccaneers defense last year. But a great point, when you look at having a good pass rush on your line, you're looking at the outside linebackers. You're looking at your interior defensive tackles. You're looking at your defensive ends. Vita Vea is a great pass rusher, but I don't want Vita Vea to lead the team in sacks every year. I would like one of my pass rushers to do it. I personally don't have a ton of faith in Joe Tryon-Shoyinka personally. I think that the time has come and gone for him to kind of explode. High expectations for me this year on Joe Tryon-Shoyinka are a ceiling of like 7 or 8 sacks. And even if he gets 7 or 8 sacks, I don't know if that's going to be enough for the Buccaneers to decide to bring him back next season. Cody, before we move on from the defense, we will say goodbye to James, who does have to take off very quickly, but we're going to keep this thing rolling. We will wrap it up here. James, Godspeed. Thank you for your time, my friend. Good talking to you. Cody, your thoughts on the Buccaneers pass rush?
Yeah, kind of like what James started off with. I mean, I understand the excitement around Yaya Diaby, and I understand the excitement around some of these young guys, but like you said, there's no premier pass rusher on the outside at outside linebacker. I know that a lot of people are calling for go trade for Hassan Reddick, go trade for Matt Judon. Obviously, Matt Judon went to the Falcons. I get that, but I mean, Yaya Diaby did look really good. Yeah. Hopefully, he can continue that. Like everyone else said, JTS, he's on that contract year. Maybe that's the motivation that he needs to actually have a good year. I was a huge fan of Chris Braswell coming in. I didn't expect us to end up actually drafting him. I'm glad that they did. He sat behind Will Anderson and Dallas Turner all those years in Alabama. And when he got the opportunity, what did he have? Like, I don't know, somewhere around 10 sacks last year. And he showed what he could do, and they're very excited about him. But I mean, I personally would like to have a veteran on the team that has been there, done that. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I thought maybe Randy Gregory could come in and show us a little bit of, what he used to be. Obviously, they're just trying to get him to pay all of his fines and gain that money back, and then he's not going to be on this team anymore. But I do really like Jose Ramirez, and I really like what I saw from him in that preseason game. And I think that he's going to contribute a little bit more than what people, are expecting. But like other guys, like Anthony Nelson, like James said, he's just a rotational guy. Marquise Watts, he's probably just going to be a little rotation, But Todd Bowles, we know Todd Bowles is very good at pressure. He's very good at blitzing. He will find ways to get to the quarterback. I, like you said, hope that that's not just Vita Vea having a great season again. Yeah. Although he slimmed down, like you guys talked about, he's bound to have a good season. But yeah, I would like to have somebody in that room to show a little bit more to be comfortable.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think expecting Yaya Diaby to be your best edge rusher for a second-year player, I'm not saying that there's a lot of rookie seasons around the NFL that are flukes, but when you're putting this much pressure on a Yaya Diaby, you better pray that this kid is the real deal. I think he is. I'm a big fan of Yaya Diaby, but the fact that he's already coming off of an injury, has not had any reps at all this preseason, I don't love it. Don't love the situation the Bucs have put themselves in, but we'll find out when the rubber meets the road. Looking for strong performances, though, from this Buccaneers pass rush as the game goes on. I need to see something. I need to see quarterback pressures. When you're playing third stringers, fourth stringers, the guys that won't even make the team, looking at Anthony Nelson, looking at Chris Braswell as the game goes on, and specifically Jose Ramirez and Marquise Watts, hoping both of those guys able to step up this week. Let's talk about the linebacker group very quickly. KJ Britt, plenty of praise here throughout the preseason and training camp. I honestly think, as far as replacing Devin White with KJ Britt, I think the Bucs are going to be just fine. I like this guy's attitude. I like that he's jawing off at all the quarterbacks at camp. There weren't any fights the first day of joint practices, but the only confrontation was between KJ Britt and Trevor Lawrence. The week before, he's yelling at Baker Mayfield to start the day. So I like the energy. I like what we have seen from him. He is becoming a serviceable linebacker, and I think this year I'd like to see him take a jump with the increased playing time. He did a great job last year when he was stepping in, and I think he'll take this job and run with it as far as this season goes. But looking at the rest of these guys, J.J. Russell, who led the team in tackles last week, Servassier Dennis, the 2023 draft pick, Caleb Deloach, the undrafted free agent, who did have a pretty strong game, or at least strong camp leading up to last week's game, and then V. Jones as well, rounding out that linebacker group. Are there any linebackers you guys are looking at in particular in this week's game? Gene, we'll start with you. We talk about the depth of this room. You got Lavonte David and KJ Britt. I think they're just fine. But if either one of those guys go down, who do you think is your next man up? Who do you trust the most here in this young linebacker group?
I've been keeping my eye on Savasier Dennis. I will say this: as long as you can go out there and do your job and execute like you're supposed to, these plays are vanilla. You just have to go out there and show that you can do it and be successful with it. I like Savasier. I like his football IQ. He's somebody that I had high expectations for last year. We didn't really get to see it, and hopefully that will be something that we can see this week. I know a lot of people have talked about the loss outside of the Bucs circle. Your podcasters, news people, fans have talked about the loss of Devin White as if it's a big deal. And I Bleav that, you have a lot of players that are book smart. They understand the game. And I think that has kind of been the theme that I've seen the last couple of seasons is players with that book smart, with the learning the playbook, understanding what their roles are, not trying to play above all that. So I'm really comfortable with this linebacker group. The one guy, like I said, I'm really looking forward to seeing is Savasier.
Yeah, I agree. I think Savasier, Dennis, J.J. Russell obviously still in the mix, had a strong showing last week, but Savasier Dennis is another one of those guys that I remember from the draft class last year, and I'm just hoping for him to become a contributor because then he becomes another notch under the belt for Jason Licht. You get Kalijah Kancey and Yaya Diaby doing great things for the defensive side of the ball. If you can get Savasier Dennis in a regular role in this defense, I think it goes a long way. Cody, your thoughts overall just on this linebacker group and the rest of the defense headed into tomorrow's game?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because if I remember correctly, they were talking about how they might use Savasier Dennis either way if he's a starter or not. I think I remember hearing that somewhere, but unfortunately, the guy's hurt. I mean, he keeps getting hurt, so he's not out there. And like you guys keep saying, the best ability is availability. We haven't seen as much as I'd hope to see with Dennis, but I really like what J.J. Russell showed. I really like what V. Jones showed. I think that he actually had a pretty decent showing when he was there. I think they have a good problem at linebacker. It's a lot of youth, but KJ Britt, he's going to be fine. Savasier Dennis, eventually he's going to develop into, something that they really want to see if he stays on the field. But yeah, I think that the linebacker group's fine. I think they're going to be good. Anytime you have Lavonte David out there, whoever's next to him, he's going to teach him up. He's going to have him ready. So I have no problem with the linebackers. As far as the defense as a whole, I don't have any issues with that either. I think that they're going to be better than what they were. I like Tyke Smith.
Yeah.
I think he's first up. Oh.
I thought we were going to bring this thing home. It's all right. We'll have Cody back momentarily. There he is. All right. You like Tyke Smith. What else do you like?
Tyke Smith. I like how they had Izzy in back there, free safety, free or strong. I don't know which one they had him at, but I think I liked what he, showed at safety. So Kayvon Merriweather, he played very well in that preseason game. I'm not worried about the defense at all. I think that it's a lot of youth, a lot of development. But I think ultimately that they'll be fine. They'll be a good defense this year.
One of the things that I like hearing about is one, how good of a coach Todd Bowles is at just putting players in a position to succeed. Jordan Whitehead talks specifically about wanting to play back in this defense because there's not another NFL defense like Todd Bowles. Jordan Whitehead got a good payday in New York, and he had a couple of really good games. But I would argue he wasn't the same safety. He wasn't the same player. I think Todd Bowles has this uncanny ability of getting the most out of these guys, finding a position where they can just do the most damage. You brought up Tyke Smith, Christian Izzy, and being a couple of guys back in that DB room. There's a lot of young guys this year back there getting involved. Keenan Isaac had an interception last week against the Bengals. Tyreek Funderburk having some pretty big plays throughout training camp. and then a couple of those other guys that can switch things around back there. They can play at that nickel corner spot. They can bump to free safety, just like you had said. Christian Izien being a leading candidate for that. Tyke Smith, another one of those guys. Swiss Army knives, if you will. My long-winded question is this, Gene. Looking at this Buccaneers secondary, I personally feel, I don't know if excited is the word. I don't know if secure is the word, just because you do have to take into account the cornerback room. I know things are a little bit weird after the Buccaneers traded Carlton Davis. Not everybody is sold on Jamel Dean as cornerback one, especially with his injury history. But when you look at the safeties and you look at the versatility around this defensive back room, even in these young guys, I expect Todd Bowles to get the most out of them. But how do you feel overall? I feel like there's so much talent back there. And again, so many different ways that Todd Bowles can do damage and make a lot of these guys look really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of goes back to your original question about the defense and getting home with 4, or, getting pressure on the quarterback. If you could consistently get pressure on the quarterback, it kind of alleviates the pressure on your linebacker core and your secondary as well. So I think one depends on the other. And I think that the Bucs do have the talent. And again, I sound like a homer. I know I have the whole show, but we haven't had this level of talent for a long, long time. I mean, when you look at the Bucs historically, up until 2019, 2020, you really hadn't had this level of talent on a consistent basis. So I really believe that what Todd Bowles can do with this team, as you'd mentioned, I'm very comfortable with that. But a lot of it, again, is predicated on what the front 4, what that pass rush is going to look like. And, if they can get pressure on the quarterback and keep him uncomfortable, I see big things for that secondary.
Yeah, Cody, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, in the beginning of the offseason, when we started bringing some of these guys in and right after the draft, everybody was talking about, I know a lot of the coaches and players were saying that this secondary is going to be very good, and they were very optimistic about it. But like, the best thing is there's going to be, you're going to be able to keep your starters fresh if you need to. You have guys like Tavier Thomas that can, bump in there. You have a lot of versatile guys to get in there, and they've been there, done that. A lot of guys, big colleges, like I talked about with Tyke Smith, and the youth too, like you said, Tyke, what is his name? Tyreek Funderburk.
Yeah.
I know that he got injured. Hopefully we are able to see him maybe next week. I don't know. But he showed a lot. Isaac, he showed a lot. Obviously had that interception. I think that they're going to be a pretty good group. It's going to be nice to have, your starters able to maybe take a breath every once in a while on the back end of the defense. And Todd Bowles, he just uses DBs everywhere.
Yeah.
We already know that. So he's going to bring guys in even if they're not the starters. He's going to bring these guys in because he likes this guy, how he does this. He likes how Tyke can tackle on third down. He likes how, Izien can cover pretty well. I think they're going to be fine. Todd Bowles is going to find a way to use all of them. It's going to be a good year.
Yeah, I think if everyone is able to stay healthy, and this includes your corners, this includes your Jamel Dean, your Tavier Thomas, your Breece Hall, I really do think that keeping these guys healthy is going to be huge because, like you said, it feels like a deep room. It feels like you've got a lot of guys that you can move around back there and you can make do with. And it feels like a far cry from the 2021 season where, week 5, week 6, you're signing Richard Sherman and expecting him to play that same week. I think, the Buccaneers secondary then, even though you did have a Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean dealt with injury for a lot of that season, went down week 1 against the Cowboys, and then you're just shuffling players, but from that point on. So I do think that if everyone can stay healthy, it's going to be a big-time thing. And another thing, I'll close with this. One of the things that we have heard from camp that this secondary in particular is doing, and doing better than they have in the past, that is communication. Again, this is training camp. This is preseason. But from what we can tell, Antoine Winfield and KJ Britt are the two loudest guys on the field, basically telling the defense what to do. And that's a big part of a Todd Bowles defense is communication. everybody being in the right spot with the right assignment at the right time. JC Allen was talking to us about this earlier this week. Last year when we watched Ryan Neal miss a play, 9 times out of 10, it was Ryan Neal missing the play, but maybe he miscommunicated. Maybe he was supposed to get some more help over the top than he got, and he wasn't able to do it. Maybe they were supposed to double up on that side of the field. His safety goes the other direction, and he ends up missing the play. Like, those are all things that I think led to a lot of mistakes for the Buccaneers defense last year. That late game collapse against the Texans was kind of one of those points in the season that people were circling there. But the communication has gotten better, and I think for these young guys who are going to need these valuable reps, that's going to go a long way. So I'm very excited to see not only the versatility, but the consistency, especially with some of these young guys. If they can pick this thing up and they can contribute, stay on the field, stay healthy, I'm excited to see what the Buccaneers can do on the defensive side of the ball. It is an interesting thing to try and evaluate, just because as we've talked about the entire show, how much they're leaning on younger talent this year. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch. I think by week 7 or 8, again, we're going to have a pretty good idea of what the issues are going to be. But gentlemen, I'm sorry for yapping here to close the show, but I think that's going to do it. I think we've covered just about everything we wanted to here today on this pregame episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Looking ahead for the Bucs versus Jaguars Saturday night, 7 p.m., preseason week 2. Cody Haynes, ladies and gentlemen, first-time guest of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Cody, where can people find you and your content?
Mainly on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it nowadays. It's Cody H33. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't really use any of the other social platforms. So yeah, Twitter. I may be doing some writing things here soon. Just keep an eye out for that. But I don't want to say too much. But yeah, mainly on Twitter.
Good time to start a podcast.
What's that?
I said it's a good time to start a podcast.
I have one set up, but I haven't been able to actually get it running the right way. So we'll see. Maybe I'll do that.
There we go. Never a bad
Got to
time.
take a leap, man.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, ultimately you'll find yourself in too deep at one point, but until then, it's a lot of fun, and it's a hobby that definitely follows you around. Gene, where can the
Thanks
people
for
find
having me, Rhett, too. Forgot to mention that. It's nice to be on the show finally after all these years of saying maybe I could hop on. So I'm glad we found time for me to come on here and talk football with you.
Yeah, great to have you on. Cody, personal friend of mine now for probably a while now, probably like 4, 5, 6 years, I think. I've known him for
6 years, yeah.
Longer than I thought at this point, but very excited to have you on the show. Gene, ladies and gentlemen, Gene Thomas, where can the people find you and your Buccaneers content?
You can find me on YouTube at Buck What You Heard. I have been collabing with the Buccaneers and having a blast. We are doing a beer bracket right now to find the official beer for this 2024 NFL season. So that's definitely in the works. I will be on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, and Mondays, whenever the Buccaneers have it, I believe it's 6. So I'm kind of getting my face out there a little bit more this year. I love podcasting. I think it's great, great community, and there's never not enough room for another podcast. So if you think that's what you want to do, man, just got to jump in there and do it, man.
Happy birthday, by the way, to the Cannon Fire Podcast. Turning 7 years old officially this week since our first episode. We technically did our first episode in 2016. It was kind of like a pilot episode. We did it with Mark Cook. Always going to hold a very special place in my heart, that episode. It was a training camp preview, and you can certainly tell it was our first episode. So I appreciate Mark till this day because of his patience with us. But, we've learned a lot since then. The show has grown a lot since then. And it's crazy to think that we've been doing this officially now for 7 years this week. But very excited for the season of coverage ahead, and excited for tomorrow night's game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know it's preseason, but it's football. Going to see the Buccaneers in pads, and hopefully going to see Kyle Trask ball out. Would love to see that. Thank you to everybody hanging out with us in the chat. The moderator, Willie Beeman, holding it down. Richard T., Holyoke Joe, MK, Mikey Kelly. Happy early birthday, Mikey Kelly. I believe he said he's turning 24 years old tomorrow. So be safe, party responsibly, and don't do anything that I wouldn't do. Joel L. Rican, Brutal as Bucs, and anyone else that I may have missed, Brent O'Neill, Luke Lacasse, BB King, and Kathy Gillespie, Hillbilly Hitman, Corey Fleming. A lot of people in here. Thank you guys once again for hanging out with us. Before we go, holy hell, guys, I apologize ahead of time, but we got to handle some business. It is the perfect time to remind you that the Cannon Fire Podcast is brought to you by Autograph. Autograph is honestly one of the coolest communities that I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of, and I'm going to tell you some more about it. It is an app that helps curate the best content, tickets, and gear to help you fan to your full potential. Fellas, we know that being a fan is a full-time job, so Autograph does the heavy lifting for you. From tickets for big matchups to breaking news, the Autograph app is curated content for fans of all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All the podcasts, articles, and game predictions you could ever want, including this very show. The new replay feature lets you get the day's news without the noise for when you need the too long didn't read to start your day. Use promo code BUCS to download for free on Google Play or the Apple App Store today. That is promo code BUCS, B-U-C-S, over on Autograph. And it's very cool. I've been using the app on my phone, and it's literally an all-in-one feed for all the Bucs news you could ever need. All the big dogs are on there, all the podcasts, all the publications, Pewter Report, Bucs Nation, Bucs Wire. You can find us. You can find the Pewter Report podcast, Locked on Bucs, and I Bleav more shows, more publications, becoming a part of this community every single day. And at the end of the day, you get rewarded for just doing the things that you do already. You could watch this episode of the podcast, and they'll give you 100 coins that you can go use and get discounted Buccaneers tickets with. It is badass. And once again, we are very glad to have Autograph sponsor the show. Last but not least, you can find myself. There you go, Jeans. Last but not least, you can find myself Instagram and Twitter at Rhettakus, Rhettakus. If you follow me, I will follow you back. I'm also on Autograph at Rhettakus. Go find me on the leaderboard. See if you can read more articles than I did this week. Boys, thank you once again for your time.
Hey, real quick before you go, what was that? What was that code again?
Bucs, B-U-C-S. Promo code Bucs, my friend. B-U-C-S. Now I gotta make sure. We gotta wait till he's officially in.
Wish I had my phone on me. I do the same.
It's all good. I'll send you the link afterwards.
I got you later.
I'm a company man, brother. I'm prepared.
All right. Yep.
Perfect.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Hell yeah. Thank you, Gene. Thank you, Cody. Thank you, James Hill, a.k.a. Mr. Bucs Nation. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host. Thank you guys once again for hanging out with us live. We will talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.